Hello my friends.
Hey everyone, glad to have you back here to do some more math.
We are infinitely grateful
that we have another opportunity to see you all again.
Today we want to continue sharing with you the results of our experimental method for determining the maximum value and utility ratio of Hearthstone cards.
The focus of the research this time are the new cards from Castle Nathria.
During testing, one of the cards received such a high result that it completely broke our algorithm, putting the results of the experiment in jeopardy. You probably wouldn't expect such hidden value from this card.
To get more information about our method, watch previous videos, in which we talk in detail about the nuances and logic of our algorithm.
Here are some short facts about our approach. We are trying to explore how far power creep has come in Hearthstone compared to classic game standards.
To do this, we take a card and break it into different components. We assign a nominal value to each part based on classic Hearthstone standards whenever possible. In addition, we assign an additional cost to it if it has stacking effects. As a result, we're able to compare the actual mana cost of the card with the nominal value of its effects, which is displayed by the max value indicator.
We are only interested in situations in which the full potential of a card's effects are achieved. We ignore all other scenarios. In the future, we hope to find a way to determine the level of difficulty of fully realizing the effect. Our method evaluates cards working in a vacuum, without taking into account additional combos and synergies, since we are primarily interested in how insane the individual effect Blizzard has prepared is.
Please don't take this method too seriously, it's far from perfect. Cards that are good on paper are quite often useless. But this method does a good job of demonstrating what card effects actually consist of.
Let's not waste any time, and get straight to the review.
Let's start with a simple card. Priest of the Deceased uses the new Infuse keyword. The reference for this card is Dreaming Drake. These cards work in the same way as Corrupt cards, but instead, in order to transform into a stronger version, Infuse cards need to kill a certain number of minions to transform. In these calculations, we're interested in the maximum possible value a card can have, so we're considering a scenario in which you manage to fulfill the entire condition. So, you get a minion that has 4 mana worth of stats and also has the taunt ability.
We believe that each stacking effect should have a face value of 1 mana crystal. Let's say that the taunt keyword is valued at 0 mana. Thus, by investing 2 mana, you have the opportunity to get a creature that has a maximum value of 5 mana crystals. The utility ratio reflects the ratio between the max value and actual cost of the card. For the Priest of the Deceased, this figure is 2.5. In other words, for this cost you will get 2.5 times more value than classic standards. But that doesn't mean you'll get that value in every game. Sometimes you will be forced to wait too long to awaken the effect or need to use a card without its bonuses. We do not yet know how to give this significant disadvantage a numerical value.
Buffet Begun is another card with the Infuse mechanic. If the conditions are met, you are able to create a significant threat on turn 4. But as history shows, even cards with such a powerful effect don't always manage to find a place in the modern Hearthstone meta.
The next card is more of a research interest for us, since it is able to clearly demonstrate the logic of our mathematics. Murloc Holmes has perfect vanilla stats, which aren't actually that important in modern Hearthstone. The effect allows you to get 3 of your opponent cards, but for this, you must solve a chain of 3 riddles.
If you fail, you get nothing, but as we said, we're interested in the best case scenario. The analog to this effect in Classic is Mind Division, but used 3 times here. Thus, your maximum value, if you succeed, will be 9 mana crystals. However, there is a card that's a bit more similar in Knights of the Frozen Throne. Devour Mind copies 3 cards from the opponent's deck. What's more interesting is that our method shows the same result in both cases. We want to believe that our approach, at least partially, captures the true value of stacking effects in Hearthstone.
Next in line is the most hyped card of the expansion. Prince Renathal is a condition improver card type. A feature of the starting effect activation is deck restrictions. We have already seen cards of this type in the past. For example, Baku and Gan improved your conditions at the start of a match, while Amara, Warden of Hope, increased your health to 40 hit points after completing the quest. But there is usually a penalty you must pay for the effect. In addition to the completely useless body of Prince Renathal, you will have to put an additional 9 cards into the deck, which will most likely have a lower level of efficiency. That is, every 4th card will be slightly less effective.
Determining the value of cards that have a start of game effect is extremely difficult, since you gain an advantage without investing any resources. In classic Hearthstone, effects never appeared out of thin air. You had to spend cards or mana to use the right tool. Cards of this type definitely violate the original rules of the game.
To bring this card up to classic standards, let's say you draw the effect separately from the card at the start of the match, after which the effect is activated by applying 2 limited versions of shield block that only give you armor. You don't activate the draw effect, but at the same time, increasing your hit point limit has more value than armor. For this reason, we left the nominal cost of these cards unchanged.
Thus, when trying to rate this card based mainly on classic standards, we see that this effect is equivalent to about 10 mana crystals. At the start of the game, you activate an effect costing 10 mana without spending any resources.
If you think about it a little, the nominal cost of the effect is the equivalent of using the reverse version of Pyroblast not to reduce the life of the opponent, but rather to increase your own.
Guys, I imagine this effect differently. Let's imagine that at the start of the game you summon a special taunt that has the not a minion keyword and has 0/10 in stats. These stats are equivalent to a very bad 4 mana minion. Let's add additional mana for a special keyword which is immunity from AoE effects as well as spells that interact with minions. In this case, I got about the same value.
A few words about locations. We were a little disappointed with the new card type, as other than the new frame, this mechanic looks too familiar. The new card type is very similar to objective spells from Alterac Valley. They are also very similar to profession tools from Stormwind. The main difference between locations is the presence of a cooldown, which slows down the receipt of the maximum value.
For example, let's look at Sanguine Depths. By investing 1 mana, you'll be able to immediately use a weaker version of Inner Rage. To implement the remaining 2 charges, you have to wait at least 4 turns. The max value in this case is only 2 mana. This is a really bad result for modern Hearthstone. Only an extremely powerful synergy can save this card. Muck pools have the same value if Mutate's cost is left unchanged. In classic Hearthstone, the effect of transforming a creature into a more expensive one didn't exist, but I think the effect is worth at least 1 mana. Therefore, we decided to increase the nominal value of this effect. So, Muck Pool for 1 mana gives you a benefit of about 5 mana crystals in the long run. Very often, single mana cards end up having increased power for their cost. It's pretty common in Hearthstone.
Priest got a very interesting tool. Cathedral of Atonement is a copy of Hand of Adal that allows you to activate the effect 3 times. The nominal value of Hand of Adal, according to our approach, is 3 mana. You gain the buff plus drawing the card, plus the additional cost for stacking effects. Thus, by investing only 3 mana in the new Priest location, you will receive a benefit that is equivalent to 11 mana crystals. This means that in the long run you will get almost 4 times more value.
The developers offer the skeleton archetype as the mage's main strategy this expansion. To talk more specifically about mage cards, let's first look at Volatile Skeleton. This is a damage dealer card type with a delayed activation effect. Boombot can be considered its prototype. The creature's body does not match the vanilla test, so it can be valued at 1.5 mana crystals. 2 damage to a random enemy would be worth 1 mana crystal by classic standards. In fact, the effect is most similar to Arcane Missiles, which is too good for its cost. Plus 1 mana crystal for stacking effects. Thus, a creature's max value is 3.5 mana crystals, which is too small for modern standards.
Knowing this, it will be easier for us to evaluate the next location.
Nightcloak Sanctum allows you to summon a volatile skeleton with a nominal cost of 3.5 mana, as well as use the effect of freezing an opponent's minion 3 times. Even though the creature freeze effect costs 0 mana, we have to add 1 mana crystal for stacking that effect, so overall, for 1 location durability charge is equivalent to 4.5 mana. So for just 3 mana, your maximum benefit is over 15 mana crystals. But you'll only get this benefit when you can use all 3 location charges and when all 3 creatures die and deal damage. This card completely broke our evaluation method due to the sheer amount of stacked effects. Is this really the strongest card in the expansion and the first candidate for a nerf, or could we be wrong? It's always possible.
I don't believe this card is that strong, but the method says otherwise. Let's look at another card with this synergy. Cold Case is both a summoning spell and a type of heal, as it gives you 4 armor. That is, it has an effect that is half as strong as Ice Barrier, although it activates immediately, which is a benefit. This card does not go beyond common sense and looks quite balanced for modern Hearthstone.
The icing on the cake is Kel'Thuzad, the Inevitable. It's not just a summoner minion, it's a board generator. This card is also a potential damage dealer. But its effect can only function in conditions of specific synergy. To calculate the maximum value, let's imagine that during the match you manage to summon 10 skeletons. In this case, if your board is empty, you will resurrect 6 of them and 4 more will be blown up. In this scenario, your maximum benefit will be over 40 mana crystals. But don't let this unrealistic result fool you.
Due to the delayed activation of the death rattles, you can realize the second half of your value, at best, on the next turn, of course, if you are still alive.
As a result, Mage is getting a very powerful set of cards that are very synergistic, and they have effects that have huge maximum values, at least on paper. At the same time, the presence of death rattles and thus delayed activation of effects will not allow you to get this value immediately in a lot of cases, or at all, which may have a negative effect on Kel'Thuzad's effectiveness as a finisher card.
The next card on the list has the largest number of difficult-to-define factors. Decimator Olgra is a potential purifier, getting stronger for each damaged minion. A close relative of this card is Deathwing Mad Aspect, which has a more predictable effect. In determining the value of Olgra, we deliberately ignore the stats, since she will most likely die during exchanges with enemy minions. Let's imagine an almost ideal situation. You manage to increase the stats by 3. You deal 6 damage to the opponent's face and also 3 enemy minions. This effect will be equivalent to 4 uses of Fireball, but damage to creatures will have less value than going face. In this case, your utility ratio will be 2.6, which is extremely high for this card. You might be able to get higher value, but this card relies too much on perfect timing, which is a huge downside.
Elitist Snob is the reincarnation of Zilliax, but the legendary mech was completely autonomous, and did not need to fulfill any conditions, unlike the Elitist Snob. Such a combination of keywords leads to extraordinary interactions, forcing us to evaluate effects according to a different principle. At first, you have the ability to get a taunt, after which the effects of Bubble and Charge allow you to deal 3 damage to an opponent's creature without consequences and restore 3 hit points to your hero. In vanilla Hearthstone, this could be the equivalent of using a limited version of Lightning Bolt and Light of the Naru. The effects of Lifesteal plus Taunt are long-term, so you have a chance to restore 3 hit points again during the opponent's turn.
Despite the fact that we took into account the best circumstances, the utility ratio was only 2. In other words, you will get twice the benefit by classic standards. But is this enough for modern Hearthstone?
This doesn't look very powerful. What do you think we missed in the calculations? Maybe the heal effect should be worth more? Another card that I want to talk about turned out to be somewhat of a reincarnation of Cthulhu. The features of Sire Denathrius are self-improvement, combo potential, and the card claims to be a finisher. The effect without bonuses is equivalent to using Cinderstorm and Holy Light, which is extremely low value for such a high cost card.
Of course, you can get more charges if this card is in your hand when your creatures die, but how much Anima can you collect before turn 10? Let's look at the scenario of 9 bonus charges. This will be equivalent to using 3 copies of Arcane Missiles and Light of the Naru. It still looks too weird for a finisher. The only things that can save this card is OTK combo potential, or maybe players will find ways to destroy a ton of their own creatures, both of which are ignored by our algorithm.
The concept of Remornia Living Blade looks unique. After dealing damage, it transforms from a minion into a weapon and vice versa. In minion form, the rush effect will be equivalent to Shadow Bolt. You have a chance to use minion form 3 times, allowing you to switch to weapon form twice. The weapon effect will be the equivalent of Death's Bite. So for 7 mana you will get a nominal value of 16 mana crystals for 2 turns, but you may be able to get more benefit under more favorable circumstances. Finally, we want to show you some more quick calculations without comment.
Okay, that's all for today.
Love your feedback on this method. What other new cards are worth doing the calculations for in your opinion?
As always, we would like to express our huge gratitude to our patrons.
Dear friends, your support is incredibly important to us.
We hope to be able to get in touch in the future.
With even more data, and of course, even more mathematics.
Take care of yourself.
And good luck.
Job's done.